Greetings. I have developed this simplest shoe in the world. It's primarily being made for children in tropical areas where there are parasites that can come up into their body through their bare feet. These shoes are made of just two materials, so my thought is that possibly people can make them for themselves or for their children. That if you can get a bicycle or a motorcycle inner tube, maybe bicycle for the smaller sizes and motorcycle inner tube for the larger sizes, you can have a impermeable sole on the shoe and then can use either leather, which I'm imagining there's goat skins get tanned all over the world. You can use leather or cloth like jeans or wool. Before you make one of these little shoes, it's a good idea to make a mock-up out of something like felt and non-woven material, if possible. So that you can see if it's a right fit if you're making this for a child that you know. So I made this one out of felt, and I used the chuck-a-boot variation, meaning that there's just a slit down the middle of the upper, and then I raised those sides up. I stitched on a little tongue here and used a piece of inner tube to make a little tie in the front. And on a size 11 last, it fits perfectly. So here's a bicycle inner tube cut and flattened out. Don't worry about this white stuff inside there. It's calcium compound. So this one is about 4.5 inches wide when it's opened up. I have used my pattern to cut out the bicycle inner tube bottom sole, and it would be much more comfortable to have some kind of lining inside of it, so you could use like a leg of a pair of jeans or other kinds of fabric. Since I have this leather, I'm going to use it. I'm applying the Elmer's glue to hold these two layers together, and I'll wait until I've glued the two together before I'll cut out the leather lining so that they'll both match. It's pretty impossible to do if you cut them both out and try to line them up. And since this is, you just need this glue on one of the surfaces that you're adhering. I'll draw around the pattern to transfer this onto the leather. To make holes, the most primitive way would be with a hammer and a nail, and have it on a tree stump or something so you can hammer through. If you have a tool like this, which is a 0-0 punch, you need to put another piece of leather below so that this tube will go all the way through the layers that you're cutting. You can also use it's called a drive punch, which is, this is another 0-0 punch. This makes quite small holes. And then you need to put something underneath, so either a piece of this hard rubber type of material or a block of wood. Of course, this is a very small block, but if you have especially a cut log, you use the end of the cut, not the side, but like you're looking down onto the log, and so you can use a hammer or a mallet and punch holes this way. One of the features of this shoe is that you have the stitch marks here on the pattern, and you can do both the upper and the sole at the same time. So that speeds things up, and I like to use a stapler to hold the pieces together so they don't move around while I'm punching the holes. I can use this screwdriver for a sewing machine that has a small slit maker here. If I want to use that to punch out these holes, you know, with a hammer and something wood or plastic underneath, this would work fine too, and it's much less visible than the round holes are. I have finished punching out the holes that connect the upper to the sole, and what's left is to make the holes for stitching the heel tab. So the heel tab stands up like this, and this part will be stitched together, meeting that, like that. So this has 9 stitch holes here, and I need to have 9 stitch holes here to match it. And so I have 6 on the upper piece and 3 here on the sole. Before I start stitching, I want to show you if you happen to have this ideal thread is waxed braided thread, and I have a needle with a big eye in it, and if you have this kind of thread, you can hold it onto your needle by puncturing it, bring it past your eye of your needle, and then give it a tug, and you can pull it back up, or you can pull it down to shorten your thread, and it will then stay on your needle. So I'm going to make this thread about 6 times the length of the sole. So there's 1, and I'll get 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I'll put a knot at this end, and it's really nice to burn your knots, and probably most places have a way to do that. So to burn this, I'm going to make it a little big. So I took that loop around twice to make a knot, and then I'm ready to start stitching. So I'll start coming up through the first stitch hole here in the upper. I'm going to use a stitch that I don't know the name of it. I'm going to call it the bar and the diagonal, which is not a great name, but so I took it from inside of the upper piece, and then I went to the outside of the sole, and I'm going to bring this up and then I'm going to go in that same hole that I started out with. From the inside. So I've got a bar here, just a stitch across, and now I'm going to make my diagonal. So I'm going to the next stitch and from the outside of the sole and up into the inside of the upper. And sometimes you need a little pair of pliers to pull this through, depending on how big your holes are. So I've gone from one stitch, one bar, diagonally brought me to the next couple of stitches, the next stitch in the sole and the next stitch in the upper. And there I'm going to do the same thing, make a bar. So I go back in that same hole that the diagonal went into, and then back into the same one that I had just got into, and pull this through, and I start to get a pattern that looks like this. I get a kind of like a Z. And I'm going to tug it nice and tight, so there I can see the Z. I'll do one more to show you, and then I'm going to sit down and stitch this shoe together. So I go in my next stitch hole, with a diagonal, making a diagonal stitch. I think I should have made bigger holes in the sole. It's a little tight. No, I am wanting these to be as waterproof as possible, so smaller holes or slits is ideal, but you have to be able to stitch it too. So I've done a diagonal. Now I'm going to do a bar. So that gives you the idea of how to make this stitch. This is how we'll stitch the shoe together, since I've got the all of the holes made. I'm starting in the inside of the upper, and then I'm going to the outside of the sole, and I'm just using a short piece of thread so that I don't have to deal with a long piece of thread while I'm trying to show you this. And then from the inside, I'm going through that original hole, and I've made a bar here. I've made this bar stitch. To continue, I'm going to make a diagonal stitch across to this next outside of the sole and into the next stitch hole on the upper. And so I make a diagonal stitch like that. So that's what I'm going to keep doing, making bars and diagonals. So now it's time for a bar, and this I'm going to use these two holes, the one the diagonal went in and the one directly across from it. So I'm kind of making a Z type figure, and so I'm diagonally going into the sole, up into the upper, and I'm going to make another bar where the diagonal went in and directly across from it. So I'll be making a stitch like this all the way around the shoe. I'll come back and show you when I'm finished. I finished stitching the upper to the sole. I have a knot here, and then I brought the thread under a couple of stitches and cut it off. And now I'm doing this heel tab. So I put a needle on both ends of this thread to do the 2 needle running stitch, and I evened out the lengths of thread and made sure I went around the top edge, and then I continue to stitch in the next set of, this time I made slits. I go in the next stitch hole and then take the other thread through that same hole but in the opposite direction and give a tug. And so I'll keep going down, and when I make a knot, I'll turn the shoe kind of inside out. So I can reach inside there. So I will come back when I have these seams stitched and the shoe will be complete. So here's the completed little shoe. I'm going to be making pairs of these for my grandchildren, especially because they're so easy to make. They can help with this, and the fun part would be the decorating. They could decorate with applique, acrylic paint, or Sharpie permanent markers. Those would be especially easy to manipulate, and with either drawing objects or designs, they can make these little shoes totally unique. The patterns for making these shoes, you'll find a link below the video to my website where you can get the patterns in sizes from a 6-inch foot up to an 8-inch foot. And if you are benefiting from this video, I would appreciate receiving a like for it, and if you have a comment, I'd be happy to answer it.